Have you ever wondered how some individuals, as if possessing a mystical power, manage to influence their surroundings without uttering a single sound? They don't resort to shouting or pleading. Their weapon is detachment. And then, as if by magic, everything around them transforms. Energy shifts direction, people awaken to doubts, they hastily try to catch up, experiencing a spectrum of emotions. Now, imagine you become such a person. What happens if you forego immediate reactions to every event, choosing silence over an automatic response, and withdrawal over an emotional outburst? This is the crucial point. When you stop being constantly available, emotionally, physically, and psychologically, the world around you enters a state of uncertainty. The reason is simple. Those around you are accustomed to controlling you by leveraging your reactions, impulses, and predictability. But the day comes when you decide to withdraw, and the rules of the game fundamentally change. Those who thought they knew you perfectly suddenly realize they have no idea who you truly are. Carl Jung once remarked, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Ponder this. When you become unavailable, who starts to show desperation? Who experiences irritation? Who tries to provoke you to elicit even the slightest reaction? This says far more about those people than it does about you. Above all, it reveals how skillfully you've been manipulated without even realizing it. Time and again, individuals sacrifice themselves, striving to please others, maintain harmony, and keep close those who, in essence, were never truly close. Every strained agreement, every immediate response, and every intense emotional reaction drains a part of one's vital energy. And what remains at the end of a busy day? Only exhaustion, bitter disappointment, and a crushing emptiness whose cause is hard to explain. But the answer is simple. One becomes too available to those who don't deserve even a fleeting moment of their attention. This isn't about isolating oneself from the entire world. It's crucial to learn to choose yourself, to embark on the path that renowned psychologist Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming a whole, self-sufficient, and authentic individual. This process begins with the realization that silence can sometimes be more potent than 1,000 arguments, and that detachment, driven not by a desire to escape problems but by conscious choice, becomes an act of strength. A natural question arises. How long will one allow others' emotions to control them? How long will they react like a puppet to every touch on their vulnerable spots? Perhaps it's time to cut these strings, detach, and become an enigma to those around you. For when one stops being an easy target, everything around them begins to change. From an early age, individuals are taught to be constantly visible, to respond instantly to requests, to strive to please, and to agree unconditionally, even when their inner voice protests. From childhood, they are instilled with the belief that their worth is determined by how useful they are to others. Paradoxically, however, such excessive availability is not a virtue but rather transforms into a kind of prison. As long as one is convinced of the need for constant presence and willingness to help, they remain vulnerable to manipulation, emotional exhaustion, and oblivion once their usefulness wanes. The reason lies in the fact that constant availability makes a person predictable, turning them into a tool. Others begin to perceive them as an emergency emotional button, pressing it when they need attention, relief, or validation, then putting them back on the shelf until the next necessity. An individual caught in the illusion that their constant presence will secure others' support often fails to realize this. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung introduced the concept of the persona, a mask we wear to be accepted, loved, and recognized. It is this mask that makes one excessively available. They say everything's fine, when in reality they're suffocating from exhaustion, respond immediately to messages even when feeling drained, constantly explain, justify, and defend themselves, as if they owe the world something. However, the more one places themselves at the center of someone else's stage, the more they disappear from their own. Constant availability is a veiled form of self-denial, a way to seek approval, avoid rejection, and attempt to control the impression one makes on others. But this control comes at a price, the loss of inner peace. One's vital energy is distributed as if it were inexhaustible, though in reality, it is limited, very much so. People seeking your incessant availability don't truly desire you, but rather the benefits you provide them, validation of their significance, pleasant company, a distraction from worries, and emotional support. However, should you change, set boundaries, or refuse to react immediately to their requests, these very same people will begin to show displeasure, shower you with accusations, and claim you become odd. The reason lies not in your transformation, but in the fact that you've ceased to fulfill their accustomed function. Herein lies the cruel irony. The more available you are, the less value others place on your presence in their lives. Abundance dulls the senses, turning you into an emotional doormat that can be walked all over. No one respects what comes effortlessly, nor values what is always at hand. Therefore, it's worth pausing to consider who truly deserves your time, attention, presence, and willingness to listen, and perhaps who deserves your absence. But before answering these questions, it's essential to understand one crucial thing. Why do we react so impulsively? Why do we so easily succumb to others' influence? What lies behind this almost automatic desire to respond, justify, and please? The answer to this question lies in the concept of psychic energy, proposed by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. And we will discuss this in the next section. For your energy is the most valuable thing you possess. And if you don't learn to protect it, someone will inevitably use it against you. In Carl Jung's understanding, the human psyche is not a thoughtless mechanism blindly reacting to external stimuli. He envisioned our mind as a complex energy system, where every thought, every feeling, and every action requires an expenditure of psychic energy. The main question is who controls the distribution of this energy, the individual themselves or the external world. Impulsive reactions lead to an irrational waste of psychic energy. By defending against unfounded criticism, responding to provocations to prove a point, engaging in senseless arguments, and trying to please those who don't show due appreciation, one expends their inner strength on what brings them no benefit. Jung emphasized that resistance only strengthens undesirable phenomena. The more active the reaction, the stronger the dependence becomes. Emotional exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, but rather a result of misdirected energy. An exhausted person becomes vulnerable, turning into easy prey for manipulators, opportunists, and emotionally needy individuals. They unerringly identify those who cannot protect their energy, who react to everything, and who strive to solve all the world's problems, and they shamelessly take advantage of this. Carl Jung, the eminent Swiss psychologist and psychiatrist, asserted that the foundation of psychological health is one's ability to effectively manage their inner energy. This implies the skill of setting boundaries, resolutely declining unwanted obligations without remorse, maintaining deliberate silence without fear of appearing cowardly, and thoroughly analyzing a situation before taking any action. True strength lies not in spontaneous reaction, but in the conscious choice of when and how to act. This is only possible with deep self-knowledge, which allows one to recognize their own impulses and motives. Recall how many times sleepless nights were a result of unresolved conflicts or unfinished conversations. How much time has been spent endlessly replaying phrases that should have been spoken, or trying to understand the reasons for others' ill will. All of these are examples of the irreversible loss of psychic energy. One sustains the existence of ghosts from the past that should have long vanished, and fuels destructive relationships, simply because they stubbornly pursue explanations and answers. Psychic energy can be compared to a protective force field. When it is reliably guarded, one radiates confidence and calm. Their presence in society commands respect and attention, even without a single word. However, with ineffective management of this energy, an individual becomes vulnerable, reactive, and unnoticed, and the world is merciless towards those who easily give up. Therefore, it's essential to start by carefully observing your own emotional triggers. What causes an automatic reaction? What throws you off balance? It is at these points that valuable energy leaks, and it is on them that you should focus your efforts. The goal is not to become insensitive or indifferent, but to learn to consciously choose how and when to react, thereby gaining full control over yourself and your life. Carl Jung, a perceptive explorer of the human psyche, once arrived at a revolutionary conclusion. By preserving personal energy, one dismantles the projections that others attempt to impose upon them. This process can cause significant irritation, as it brings to the surface the unappealing reality of hidden manipulations. Next, we will discuss how unscrupulous individuals use others' energy for their own purposes, and why emotional unavailability is a potent weapon against such manipulations. The reader is about to come face to face with those who have unconsciously drained their vital energy. Often, there's an illusion of control over a situation and a certainty about the awareness of one's reactions. However, the truth is that most emotional reactions are programmed, and those aware of this can easily manipulate others. Opportunists don't need to resort to shouting, threats, or pressure. They simply use existing buttons, eliciting a predictable reaction. Carl Jung called this phenomenon projection, a psychological mechanism by which an individual attributes to others qualities they cannot recognize in themselves. However, there's another side to the coin that most overlook. one is not only subjected to projections but also becomes their receptacle. The more emotionally open one is, the more they become a blank canvas upon which others paint their projections. In everyone's life, there are those who remember their existence only in moments of acute need, companions who expect immediate solutions to all problems, and acquaintances whose praise only lasts as long as you are tangibly useful. It's crucial to understand that such behavior is not accidental. Such individuals interact not with the person as such, but with a convenient image, the role one voluntarily agrees to play. The reason for this agreement lies in fear, the fear of causing disappointment, losing favor, or being abandoned. The most effective manipulations are not carried out through open conflict, but in a silence steeped in guilt. This occurs when one feels indebted to another, convinced of the need to always be available, ready to help and understand, even if it destroys their inner world. The key point is that a manipulator doesn't need to fully control their victim. It's enough for the victim to continue reacting predictably. However, when this reaction ceases, when one begins to say no, to respond with silence, to distance themselves instead of making excuses, carefully constructed illusions crumble. The mask they tried to impose loses its power. This throws manipulators out of their comfort zone, as they no longer understand who they are dealing with. What's worse, they are forced to confront themselves, and not everyone is ready for that. When one becomes unavailable, it can be perceived by others as a challenge, forcing them to look inward and confront their own inner emptiness. The silence emanating from them exposes the internal chaos and unease that others prefer to ignore. As a result, a defensive reaction arises: criticism, attacks, and emotional outbursts. The reason lies not in this person's mistakes or wrong actions, but in the fact that they have stopped serving as a convenient mirror in which others were accustomed to seeing only what pleased them. As Carl Jung once noted, enlightenment comes not from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. When one distances themselves and stops upholding the usual order of things, the shadow hidden within others surfaces. This becomes unbearable for those accustomed to using them as a means of escaping themselves. However, the question arises, is the individual themselves ready to endure the discomfort associated with misunderstanding, rejection, and even aggression that may arise in response to their desire to protect themselves? Are they ready to stand firm in the silence that follows the breaking of old ties? It is in this silence that a new strength emerges, which we will discuss further. In the next section, it will become clear why silence can be the most powerful weapon, capable of disrupting the human psyche and fundamentally changing relationships with the surrounding world. In our current era, where the flow of information never ceases, everyone strives to be heard, to react instantly to any stimulus, to prevail in meaningless arguments, and to assert their rightness, even at the cost of their own peace of mind. However, there exists a powerful force that few know about, and even fewer know how to wield. This is the power of silence. This is not silence dictated by passivity or cowardice, but conscious, strategic, and crystal-clear silence. Such silence is not an absence, but rather an amplified presence. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung viewed silence not as an emptiness, but as fertile ground conducive to interpersonal transformation. When one ceases to react automatically to external stimuli, they gain the opportunity to observe. And in the process of this observation, they begin to notice certain patterns that previously eluded their attention: emotional repetitions, manipulative tactics, cyclical manifestations of self-destructive behavior. Silence allows for clarity of thought, and this clarity poses a serious threat to those accustomed to controlling others. Many have surely noticed how some people begin to panic when an interlocutor doesn't respond, doesn't explain their actions, and simply disappears from view. This happens not out of longing for a specific person, but because silence deprives them of the ability to control the situation. As long as one is engaged in dialogue, they remain in the game by someone else's rules. But when they fall silent, they change the rules of the game, unsettling anyone accustomed to feeding off others' reactions. True silence is not merely the absence of sound, but a masterful command of one's own life force. It is the ability to not succumb to the influence of others' emotions and a conscious decision to avoid conflicts not worth the emotional toll. As Jung asserted, the process of individuation, or becoming oneself, requires such detachment, for only in silence can one hear their own inner voice, unmuted by the noise of the external world. However, make no mistake, silence has its price. It inevitably distances you from those who only valued the role you played. One becomes incomprehensible to those who viewed them through the prism of their own perceptions. In the eyes of others, they may appear cold, detached, and arrogant. But all this is merely the reaction of those who did not seek to know their true essence, but only saw practical utility. And here is the harsh truth of life. As one grows spiritually, they become increasingly discerning with their words, realizing that every utterance is an energetic investment, and not everyone is worthy of access to their innermost thoughts. At times, silence is not an escape, but an assertion of sovereignty, the language of those who no longer need to prove themselves. Silence evokes discomfort, as it forces one to be alone with their thoughts, to delve into the chaos of their inner world. And it is this burdensome feeling that can reveal more about them than any arguments or admonitions. There's no need to bother explaining your absence, for it speaks for itself. And those who feel threatened by it merely demonstrate how much they relied on others' imbalance to maintain their own power. However, the most powerful silence is not that which throws others into confusion, but that which heals from within. A silence that establishes a connection with something beyond external praise. It is in this personal space, free from others' expectations, that the restoration of vital energy begins, essential for reconnecting with one's true self. This is what we will discuss further. For it's not enough to merely get rid of external noise. One must relearn how to consciously manage their energy, to choose where to direct it, where to conserve it, and most importantly, where not to waste it. The time has come to learn to be discerning with one's own soul. It's pointless to grasp all these truths intellectually if, in real life, one continues to automatically agree when internally protesting, to reply to messages that only cause annoyance, to waste time on meaningless conversations, and to cling to relationships that exist merely out of habit. Awareness without real action is just another trick of self-deception. True change begins with a firm intention to become discerning in one's connections and actions. And this, in turn, requires iron emotional resilience. Conscious unavailability is by no means a display of coldness, arrogance, or indifference. It's about ceasing to be available around the clock and unconditionally to everyone. It's the ability to take control of one's own energy, time, and peace of mind. And this path begins with small but significant steps, not responding instantly to messages, taking a deep breath before reacting to a trigger, withdrawing from an argument in time to avoid being drawn into chaos, turning off your phone without feeling guilty. Saying, "Not today, I'm not interested in this, I won't get involved in this." But most importantly, there's no need to justify your unavailability. No need to explain your silence. One owes nothing to anyone but themselves. And for many, this becomes an unforgivable sin, because by refusing to explain their actions, one deprives others of the ability to keep them emotionally dependent, always ready to serve, understand, and help. According to Carl Jung, the path to individuation inevitably passes through a period of seclusion. However, this is not the isolation that leads to despondency, but rather a sacred solitude, a time when one relearns to listen to their inner voice, unmuted by the external world. During this period, one's own identity is reevaluated, now based not on the opinions of others, but on their own inner compass. A great indicator of personal growth can be observing who begins to distance themselves from you as you become more reserved and self-focused. Pay attention to those who try to provoke you when you stop falling for provocations, and also to those who reproach you for changing when you finally start asserting your interests. All of this is not a sign that you've chosen the wrong path, but rather evidence of gaining freedom. Initially, the state of unavailability might cause discomfort. One might feel guilty, believing they are acting selfishly, and hear reproaches for being overly harsh. However, this is an integral part of the deconstruction process. After all, for many years, individuals were taught to put themselves second. It's natural that changes cause discomfort not only for them, but also for those who benefited from their previous version. Intentional unavailability becomes a cornerstone of self-identification. By withholding attention from the external world, an individual asserts their own worth and significance. By avoiding the toxic influence of destructive environments, they demonstrate that personal well-being takes precedence over questionable connections. Ceasing to justify one's actions commands respect, though not from everyone. However, not everyone is ready to accept such a form of existence, as emotional distancing exposes hidden emotional wounds that others are unwilling to confront. This absence highlights their reliance on others' emotional imbalance, which is necessary to maintain their illusion of control. It is at this moment that an inevitable rupture occurs. This rupture is accompanied by painful sensations, a feeling of loneliness and alienation, creating an illusion of loss, though in reality, it is liberation. But what happens next? What changes occur after a period of distancing? What is born in the silence of solitude? In the concluding section, we turn to the theme of rebirth, which becomes possible only when one has the courage to remain misunderstood, to find solace in solitude, and to strive for self-sufficiency. The time has come to realize that the solitude of the strong-willed is the path to true freedom and independence. When one consciously limits their availability to others, deep processes of transformation are initiated within their inner world. The first stage is silence, ringing, at times agonizing, causing one to doubt the correctness of their decision. Questions arise. Are they too categorical? Are they pushing away those they cherish? Over time, however, this silence takes on a different quality. It begins to act as a cleansing balm, soothing and healing emotional wounds. Anxiety is replaced by solitude. But this is not the burdensome loneliness that arises from a lack of social interaction. Rather, it is a state of fullness of being, where one is entirely focused on oneself. This is the lot of strong individuals, those who are no longer willing to betray their own interests for the sake of keeping others close. In this liberated space, where confusion and anxiety once reigned, clarity and peace now prevail. The need for approval is replaced by an inner strength that allows one to feel wholeness and self-sufficiency. As Carl Jung asserted, the process of individuation, that is, becoming oneself, inevitably requires a temporary withdrawal from the collective, a shedding of social masks, and an embrace of voluntary solitude. This is precisely what happens when one consciously limits their availability. They do not flee from the world, but return to themselves, to their true needs and desires. At this moment, they cease to be a passive observer reacting to external circumstances and transform into an active creator of their life, shaping their reality from within, based on their own values and convictions. When someone feels annoyance due to your withdrawal, it signifies not a longing for you as a person, but the loss of a convenient function you served in their life. As soon as you cease to fulfill that role, they lose interest and don't know how to interact with you. This realization brings liberation. Inevitably, on this path, you will part ways with some people, but in return, you will gain yourself. There will be a distancing from familiar places, but this will open the way to reconnection with your own essence. You might encounter misunderstanding from others, but ultimately, you will earn genuine respect. When you stop being available to everyone, your value will increase. You will become a rare and unforgettable individual. Make no mistake, this is not just change. It is a true rebirth, a new starting point, the beginning of a life where there is no longer room for emotional manipulations, psychological games, or wasted time on relationships lacking depth. Now, you welcome into your life only what resonates with your inner peace, your truth, and your integrity. If this message resonated with you, if you felt its meaning, write in the comments, "I choose my peace." Let's see how many people are ready for this significant transition.